Welcome to Conversations. I'm Suresh Kochad. US President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced a 25% tariff on all goods imported from India, along with an unexpected penalty. This will come into effect from August 1st, according to him, after US and India failed to reach an interim trade deal, triggering nervousness among the exporters. That is but natural, because the US team is expected to arrive by the end of August in India, but that is still on the cards. In fact, after making several claims over the last 4 months that he got India to agree to slash tariffs, Trump now took to his social media to make this announcement of the stiff duties and link the action, more importantly, to India's high trade surplus, which is kind of ridiculous because we have a very small trade surplus with the US. And of course, he mixed it up with the fact that we are buying oil from Russia and also arms from Russia. We know why President Trump wants us to buy oil from US and arms from US. He doesn't want us to buy it from the Russians. The grouse of President Trump is that India has always bought a vast majority of that military equipment from the ex-Soviet Union and now Russia. And of course, are Russia's largest buyer of energy, along with China. In fact, India and China, ever since the war broke out between Ukraine and Russia, have been buying huge amounts of oil from Russia at a lower price. And many a time, Dr. Jaishankar, our foreign secretary, has made it very clear that India's energy security is at the base of it all. In fact, Trump's strategy is to link that with an excuse of ending the war between Russia and Ukraine because he can starve Russia of the money that it is getting from oil, which he says is primarily coming from China and India. So now he wants India to pay 25% tariff up from the 10% existing, plus a penalty for the above, which is basically the Russian oil, starting from August 1st. Trump wants India to buy more oil from the US and also wants India to buy more defense equipment from the US. That is something that India had agreed before, and there's nothing new in it. The negotiation that were being led by Piyush Goyal ji has been going on for quite some time, but there were two major roadblocks which I'll talk about. One of which is, of course, agriculture, and the next being the MSMEs in India. We cannot compromise on them, and of course the dairy industry. In fact, President Trump has been pushing this with the DU deals, UK and Japan that he had signed up, where he went on and tried to get the best deal out of them, at the same time not giving anything from the US side. In fact, the EU deal is a very bad one according to all the countries in the European Union. Let's come back to our story now. India's deficit with US is relatively small at just about $41 billion. Now compare that to the $270 billion with China and even the $113 billion deficit that he has with a small country like Vietnam. On the other hand, US insists that it is upset with India buying more oil from Russia, which in fact went up from 0.2% before the Ukraine-Russia war to 35 to 40% now. President Trump had earlier announced a reciprocal tariff of 26% on India. He later paused it and brought it down to 10%, which is the baseline tariff for all countries. Trump's proposed penalty has complicated the calculations for Indian businesses. Over the last 3 months, President Trump has managed to get other trading partners, as I told you before, especially the European Union, Japan, Britain, and Vietnam to sign up and open up its market to the US companies and, of course, the American defense companies, in return for lowering tariff for exports they make to the United States. At the same time, it's very clear that he could not make it to zero because he doesn't have the sanction from the Congress. And in fact, that is more ridiculous because he wants India to reduce its tariff to zero and he doesn't want us to get the same facility in the US, where we got a very good deal with UK for that matter, the UK FTA that we did. In fact, our reluctance for the concession is mainly from the farm and dairy products, as I've spoken to you, and also from the MSME. Within the government of India, there is clarity now that it would not settle for a subpar deal. And no matter if August 1st comes and goes, it will actually not bend, as Rahul Gandhi claims that Modi will do. We have to stand tough because we are a huge, huge market. And President Trump and the US companies, more importantly, knows that well. I don't want to go back to the days of George Fernandez with Coke and what we did. Today we have McDonald's, KFC, and huge number of US companies who are selling their products in India. And if India tightens up its screws, these companies are going to kindly scream all the way to the United States. For India, of course, the main problem is going to be with textiles, leather and footwear, and lower end auto parts. That is what is going to get hit in the short term. But then many Indian companies are now trying to go to other countries to sell the same products and offset what would be a potential loss from the US sanctions that are coming into effect. The Trump government's argument is that it does not have the legislative mandate. Of course, we don't have the legislative mandate, but then we are doing it in fair sense. But he is not willing to bring it down to zero. It's a kind of a putting a literally gun on your head and saying sign it. And he doesn't want to bring it down to zero because he knows that when he does that, the impact is going to be on the US products made in US. Even now, if pharma companies are sanctioned as per what he wants, it is the US consumers who will pay a huge amount of money because China and India are big pharma product supplying countries. And that is going to be a big problem for them. During the negotiations, in fact, India had indicated its willingness to buy large quantities of LNG, fertilizer, and defense equipment from the US. But the demands from the Trump administration kept increasing. In fact, Trump repeatedly has said that he stopped the India-Pakistan war by dangling the trade thing in the front, as per Operation Sindoor. In fact, he kept on repeating it on a number of occasions. But now he finds that there was no such deal at all. So our opposition parties in India have been screaming, saying that India surrendered, now find themselves on the back foot because Modi government never agreed in the first place to any such trade deal. In fact, over the last few weeks, there was also an attempt to prepare the industry for the possible imposition of tariffs. That is the Indian industry. Well, talks with the proposed, of course, we saw the trade deal will continue with the US. We are now looking at alternative markets. And that is going to be the big thing. Because now comes the EU deal that we're going to do, which will open up the entire European economy for us. Then there's the Africa for us, the Middle East and other countries, because we need to stop kind of going after the American products and the American market. Time will tell what will happen because it's not easy to predict how President Trump thinks. Because he says one for 1 week and one for next week. And that is President Trump for you. India will have to play the hard ball. There's no other going from it. And sure enough, somewhere along the way, a middle path will be struck. India needs the US industry, yes. At the same time, the US industry needs India. It's very clear. There is kind of even Stevens all the way. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.